You are listening to the Fantasy Alarm, Fantasy Football with John Impemba and Andrew Cooper.
What is going on, everybody? John Impemba here with Andrew Cooper. Welcome into the Quick Out Fantasy Football live show here on the Better Sports Network and Fantasy Alarm social channels. Today, we are looking at the NFC South, Coop, a division that had quite a bit of turnover this offseason, made a lot of noise, both in free agency, in the news, in the tabloids, and in the NFL draft. My guy, man, how you doing?
I'm doing great, dude. And I love these divisions. Some people might say, oh, NFC South, that sucks. But so much turnover, so much more to talk about. Some of these divisions, it's like, the AFC West, they're great, but it's the same teams, right? That it was last year. I like these ones. So much movement on these teams that there's a lot to talk about and a lot of value to be had in fantasy football with ascending teams, changing spots, uncertainty. That's my favorite. So let's get into it.
It'll be pretty interesting to see how this division turns out, because on paper, it looks like a division that might be one of the worst in football. I mean, we've seen some bad ones so far. Last year, there wasn't a team in this one division that had a winning record. We'll see if that changes on its head or not here going into this year with all of the turnover. Before we get into the breakdown today, got to remind everybody, you're seeing it on the screen right now. The Fantasy Football Draft Guide is live. Howard Bender's been giving out his coaching system breakdown. Honestly, one of the best articles out there in all of fantasy football, in my opinion, the entire industry. He breaks down everything you need to know for each team and how these offensive and defensive systems kind of fit and how you can kind of draft and figure out which players fit into which system the best. So that's out there live right now. Every day, new articles are being released. You can get this Fantasy Football Draft Guide for free with a subscription. You see the scroll down at the bottom. Go to fantasyalarm.com/all-pro. Use promo code NFL50 or promo code COOP if you feel so inclined as well. You'll get 50% off the month-to-month price there for the first 6 months. It comes with a 7-day free trial. Comes with access to our premium Discord, and it brings you our Fantasy Football Draft Guide. If you don't want a subscription for whatever reason, you can also just buy the draft guide yourself. $26.99. You go to fantasyalarm.com/draft guide. You can sign up and take advantage of that offer now. It's being updated daily throughout the year. DeAndre Hopkins just signed. We have updates in our draft guide already pertaining to him signing there. If you go buy a magazine off the shelf, odds are right now that shows him still in the Cardinals, or you'll see analysis that he's still a free agent. What good is that now that he's on the Tennessee Titans? It honestly changes. It may have been the worst case landing spot for DeAndre Hopkins in fantasy football. So you got to get the living draft guide. Take advantage of what we got going on here today. And you get it for free if you just sign up and take advantage of the offer we got going on right now, Coop.
Bingo. Yeah. And that's the thing. You get all our rankings. You get two versions of my rankings, and all those update and change. So while people are sitting there looking at, Chig Okonkwo, a guy that I liked before the signing, and they're seeing the ADP, they're still drafting him, based on the updated rankings, everything, to hold off, hang tight, wait for the next sleeper. So we're keeping it as up to date as possible with you all the way from here through the season. So get that now and you get all of it. You don't have to wait. In fact, waiting means that you're going to just have more to read all at once in August. So Jump on that right now. Anyway, let's jump on the NFC South. Let's get into this division.
Let's get into it here. We'll talk about maybe the team that made maybe the biggest splash here, right? We're looking at the Saints. They went ahead and brought in Derek Carr to be their starting quarterback. A change from what they've had. Obviously, they had a little bit of a transition year moving from Drew Brees. They used Andy Dalton, Jameis Winston combination for a bit last year. Derek Carr, clearly their biggest add. They lost defensive tackle David Omimata, but they drafted Brian Brees in the draft in the first round to kind of replace him there. Vegas has them winning this division, plus 120 to take it down, plus 9.5 win total at plus 105 on the over, and plus 4,000 on their Super Bowl odds here. Coop, thoughts on the Saints?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I like to see for fantasy football, to be honest, a offseason like this. When you see what they did, they basically brought in a quarterback. They extended Michael Thomas to keep him there. They lost Jarvis Landry. Right now he's a free agent, but he's out there. That consolidates the targets. They decided to bring back Juwan Johnson, who plays a ton of slot. He's a converted wide receiver that plays tight end. That's what we kind of want. Like, if we can't just have two guys at the very top, we want it to be kind of like the Eagles, where it's three guys, and one of them is a great pass-catching tight end, right? And then on the flip side, they actually lost a lot of guys on defense. We don't care about that for fantasy, right? Like, it's actually better if the defense is a little bit worse and they got to throw more. They got to move it more. So I like that. They didn't do too much draft wise, though they did grab a guy that had a little pre-draft hype in A.T. Perry, right? Bigger guy where if Michael Thomas goes down, then now you're looking at him as potentially the split end, or Rashid Shaheed or Juwan Johnson stepping in. I got to ask you, John, are you a Rashid Shaheed guy or are you out? Because it's kind of a divisive player this year.
I mean, he's a boomer bust guy, right? He's not somebody that is going to get peppered with targets, but he can be a guy that, as we saw last year, can make some pretty big downfield plays. So, like, what do you think his ceiling can be if he slots in as the wide receiver 2? 800 yards, maybe 4 or 5 touchdowns. I think that's probably what I would look at him at. But we're going to get into some of these Vegas totals here in a moment. Vegas doesn't really like the passing offense here.
They don't.
For the Saints, so that's maybe a little bit worrisome. But yeah, listen, I don't think he's going to go up there and be a game breaker. Olave is going to be a 10 target a game guy, and it's going to figure out, like you mentioned, how much is Juwan Johnson involved in this offense, and how much do they lean on the running game? Right? They have Alvin Kamara for some games this season. We don't know what the suspension is going to be. They brought in Jamal Williams, and now obviously Kendre Miller is looking like he's going to be an NFI to start the year, not injury related list there. So he'll miss some games, but they could be leaning on the running game a little bit more here. So, I think where he is going in terms of drafts, he's a fine dart throw, but I'm not like drafting him being like, oh, this is a guy that's a weekly play for me until he proves it.
Exactly. And my policy on this team is pretty clear. We like Olave, right? I'm not going crazy reaching for him. I'm not taking him in the end of the first round like I've seen some people, but I'm taking him at ADP. Like, I don't mind him at that pick. But I also like Michael Thomas personally. I think, when we saw last year, he was on pace for 90 receptions. I know it's 3 games, so you can't just say, oh, he was going to have 90 receptions and 17 touchdowns. But he did score 3 touchdowns over those 3 games. He gets a quarterback upgrade. And if he stays healthy, which a big if, but if he stays healthy, then he's got that upside. So I'm personally in on him. My advice to people out there is, if you're one of the people that say he stinks now, there's no chance he stays healthy, then do something about it. Then reach a little bit on Juwan Johnson, reach a little bit on Rashid Shaheed, because I think Derek Carr is solid enough that he can support at least 2 pass catching options on this team. So, and with Alvin Kamara, obviously he takes a good chunk of that, but he's potentially going to miss time here. I mean, he's almost certainly going to miss time. So that's what I would say. I'm betting on Michael Thomas. When I look at these ADPs, and I'll get into them right now from Underdog, I look at it and say, there's room to place a bet somewhere. Sometimes everybody's going too early, or there's nobody that you like. Here, there's a narrative. Like, right, Michael Thomas is available at a decent pick, or if you really are out on him, then there's guys that you should definitely be drafting.
Yeah, that's how I feel too, right? I mean, because Michael Thomas exists, that the opportunity for Shaheed is just, to me, a downfield threat. So unless this becomes a big passing offense, like I said, in Vegas doesn't seem to be in that favor. It seems difficult for me to think 3-4 wide receiver, 4 guys can thrive in this offense. Olave is getting his. We'll see what happens with Michael Thomas. If he stays healthy, there's no way Shaheed's on the field enough to be worthy of more of anything other than a best ball play, really. So
right. And right now that's what he is. And actually, honestly, at his best ball ADP, I've taken him a couple times, because it's not necessarily a matter of, in best ball where you're drafting like 100 teams, it's not a matter of you have to pick one or the other. That's more of a redraft philosophy.
Yeah.
But the thing is with this guy, there is a contingent on Twitter that bring up a lot of stats that have been great indicators, like yards per route run. Shaheed's been excellent in that. And, with a bigger snap share and target share, that does lead to a breakout. So if they were to tell me that MT's hurt right away, I'd be in on this guy, adding him off waivers wherever I can. So basically, here's what you have. You have Chris Olave. He's wide receiver 12, which in most years you would think is pretty attainable. But in this year, the way things are going, these are Underdog ADPs that we're using right now. If you're not in on Underdog, use promo code Fantasy Alarm. They'll match up to $100. Whatever you deposit there, get in and play some of those early. That's a good way to get used to where guys are going. But normally, your wide receiver 12, you're thinking like you're going to get this guy 3rd, 4th, maybe 5th round. This year, that means he's going mid-second, sometimes early second. That's how crazy wide receiver is. So he goes that early. After him, with this team, nobody goes for multiple rounds. And I'm talking like almost 7 or 8 rounds. Michael Thomas is the next guy drafted at pick 94, wide receiver 47. That's how deep all these guys are going. Alvin Kamara also going right around 94, RB 30.
Yeah.
So, people basically, when one of them gets picked, I feel like people just go, oh, I forgot about these two guys and take the other one.
Right? The moment Alvin Kamara's suspension gets levied, it's going to be pretty interesting to see where the ADP moves. If he's going to miss, if it's 2 games, I think he's going to shoot up draft boards. People are going to start taking him much, much earlier than where he's at now.
I think people are forgetting how many games the average running back misses. Like right now, if you're looking at Alvin Kamara and you're saying he can miss 2 to 4 games, like I look at half the running backs and I say, this guy's going to miss 2 to 4 games. Right. So, I mean, if it is like 2 or 4 games or something like that, he should go up easily into the RB2 range, to be honest, given the talent that he has.
It just his pass catching upside alone, and Derek Carr, we know, is thrown to running backs. We've seen him do it while he was a member of the Raiders. We saw Josh Jacobs have good years catching the football and some of their other scat backs that they had in that offense. If Kamara's out there, we consider Carr to be a much better quarterback than they've had in that roster a couple of years that they've had to deal with out Drew Brees, then I would assume that would be a big boost to his value as well. Now, the touchdowns, we talk about times sort of how hard it is to predict. Now, Kamara's been a guy that's usually been a very high output touchdown guy, but they did bring in Jamal Williams, who just led the NFL in rushing touchdowns. So
and they have Taysom Hill, who is super annoying.
Taysom Hill, who vultures everybody. We say it all the time, and it's like, are they going to really take Derek Carr off the field for Taysom Hill? But probably,
then
probably,
they do, yeah.
Right? So
yeah, that's pretty annoying. Though they have said that they wanted to be more of a traditional tight end type guy and throw him passes, and they say that all the time, and they always do this stuff. So anyway, my philosophy on Alvin Kamara right now is that just get a couple leagues with him at RB30, because you can always draft teams later. Right over the next, we still have a month and a half. You can always draft teams later that don't have him on it, but you can't go back and get him at RB30.
Right.
Just like Tyreek Hill a couple of years ago when like everything was going on with the son, broken arm, and they were drafting Mecole Hardman. Like you could get him at a crazy price, but later on when it all went away and he signed, you couldn't go back and get it. So just get a couple now and put them in your back pocket, and then later on. The
best example is Alexander Madison from this year, right? You could have been drafting Alexander Madison in round 10 for 2 months, and then now you can't get him anywhere outside the 6th. So.
Exactly. So after that, you got Jamal Williams, RB43, Kendre Miller, RB46. We expect that to come down because he's starting on the NFI list. We don't know exactly what's going on there.
Jamal Williams probably starts moving upwards.
He probably does.
With Kamara's suspension looming and Miller likely not going to be active to start the year, Williams becomes a much more intriguing option.
Yeah, and with this team, because of the uncertainty surrounding it, like across the board, they probably have arguably the most players being drafted in the top like 175 or so picks of any team. I mean, like you look at some of these teams like the Dolphins, and it's just a couple guys, right? Like, or the Eagles, right? This team, because of how spread out and how crazy it could be, you have Taysom Hill going at tight end 19, Juwan Johnson going at tight end 21, and still Rashid Shaheed going at pick 161, wide receiver 172. Anything inside of 200 or say 190 or so picks, because you do 215 in an underdog draft or 218, those guys are getting drafted. So Rashid Shaheed at ADP 161, Juwan Johnson at 174, they're being drafted in every single draft. So there's places to plant your flags on this team.
Juwan Johnson's my highest roster tight end in basketball right now. So,
love him.
Just because of where the ADP is, like I grab him as a tight end too a lot of times, and he just kind of fits builds that I end up putting myself in anyway. So
yeah, and he was crazy efficient in the red zone last year, had a bunch of touchdowns, and we know that Derek Carr just fresh off playing with Darren Waller for years and years. Yeah. So he's not Darren Waller, but he's a converted wide receiver just like Darren Waller was. So I love that spot.
Some betting odds here. They are plus 4,000 to win the Super Bowl, which is not great. A little bit better than the worst, but still not likely. Their win total set at 7.5 and minus 120 on the over. They're plus 120 for the division. Carr's plus 5,000 for the MVP.
Yeah, I'm not touching MVP. The over-unders are interesting in this division because some of the teams, we'll get to it with the Falcons, but the odds of the Saints to win the division are the best, but other teams actually have higher wins and better odds to win the Super Bowl. Like they're basically saying like, okay, well, this team is probably the safest bet, but teams to go all the way, like I guess sometimes the randomness of a young QB factors into that. So it's kind of interesting there. I don't like betting them as the favorite to win the division because I think it's close enough that I'll bet the rest. The one that people should be looking at, and we mentioned this with AJ Brown, where the top dog wide receivers are all set at like 1,200, 1,300 yards. AJ Brown and Chris Olave are set at 1,050. So if you're a Chris Olave fan, these odds are telling you on whether or not they're factoring in maybe the injury from last year and that he might get hurt again, but they're telling you that maybe he's being overdrafted where he's going. And if you like him at ADP, then you might want to consider betting the over on that one, John.
Yeah, again, these just feel low. Derek Carr's passing yard is set at 3,800 and a half, and it's minus 120 on the under. So it's like,
feel low.
We know we're either going to be very off on this group this year, or like there's a lot we like the overs on this because we've been doing the show now for 6 weeks maybe, and we've been looking at these props and we're just head scratching for the majority of them, wondering why everything's so low.
It is crazy, yeah. And the thing is, with some people, if you're just joining us, it's the first time you're ever watching, like we are fairly conservative with our gambling. With our fantasy, you have to be aggressive. Yeah. With our gambling, we pick our spots. And John, especially you, because you're a big time value of money guy. You don't like tying money up for 9 months unless it's and it makes sense though. It's like, think about you could buy a bond, right? You could buy a CD and get 5% or something back like that. So why are we going to push money on this? But that one, I do think that if you agree with the market in ADP, then bet the over on Olave. And if you think he's being overdrafted, I'm not even sure it's worth betting the under at that line. There's other people that are going ahead that, or people that are going after him that have higher lines. Like T. Higgins and Devonta Smith have higher lines. Like there's ways to arbitrage that without betting against him here.
Yep, I agree with you. Let's move over to the Atlanta Falcons now. Last year, again, a 7-10 team. I put their best ad as Jeff Okudah. Listen, he's a couple years removed from being top 5 overall pick. I think he had a pretty good rookie year. Kind of slumped down a little bit the last season, but found himself traded. The Falcons needed defensive help. They attacked it in free agency and on the trade market. They lost Isaiah Oliver, but they drafted Bijan Robinson to go into that, tripod of offensive talent there. Now, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson in their offense. Their Vegas win total, as you mentioned, kind of interesting. They're set at 8.5 and minus 120 on the over, but they're the second best odds to win the division at plus 215, which is weird because, again, why would they have more wins but less odds than the Saints? And they're plus 6,000 to win the Super Bowl here.
Yeah, so like when we'll get to the betting odds after, as we typically do, again, we'll talk about the team, then we'll talk about fantasy, then we'll talk about betting. From a team standpoint, I think Jeff Okudah, because of the cornerback position, that's a good pick there. But I would say that there's an argument to be made for Jesse Bates, right? The safety that they pried away from the Bengals. The Bengals actually lost both safeties, and they both ended up in this division. But I think because the cornerback has a bigger impact than safety potentially, but they paid Jesse Bates a ton of money. He's a great player, so that's a great ad. I look at this team, and this speaks to how important the quarterback position is. I think this team had a phenomenal offseason, right? They kept the guys that they needed to keep for the running game. They extended Caleb McGarry, they extended Chris Lindstrom, they extended Keith Smith, the fullback. Like they kept all those pieces, and they went out and grabbed Jesse Bates and Bud Dupree, and even got Taylor Heineke to give himself a little help. Mike Hughes, like Mac Hollins. Say what you will about Mac Hollins, but with what they had, all they needed was a field stretching wide receiver. I think they got that. So, I mean, like it's crazy that they could make all these great moves, and it still boils down to the quarterback, right? We sit here and say it's all still Desmond Ridder. If another team made this kind of overhaul with a different quarterback, we would be singing their praises. And I think maybe it's good enough to make some bets here.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think one of the reasons Taylor Heineke signed here is that he looked at the landscape. He's like, I think I have an actual chance to play here, right? Like, and if he does play, you're putting a little bit more of a traditional quarterback now in this system where, we saw Mariota and Ridder. They're a little bit more of the mobile RPO-y type of quarterback. If you got a traditional passer back there, that's great for what I think is everybody. Great for the running back. Because, Heineke will dump down. We saw him do that with McKissick and Gibson. Bijan Robinson is a very, very good pass catcher. But then you got to look at Kyle Pitts and Drake London now also getting a traditional passer could also help them. So I'm a big fan of this team. I haven't been taking any London at ADP, but I am more interested in Kyle Pitts this year where he's coming off draft boards than where he was coming off the draft board last year when it comes to the investment you have to make.
Yeah. And I'll say this about Taylor Heineke. Like, for guys like this is such a smart move for him, because even if he isn't the guy, if Desmond Ridder succeeds, now he's kind of got that on his resume as part of that room. And we've seen so many guys that are now coaches have that career, where like Kevin O'Connell did it. And Davis Webb is the best example, where Davis Webb, nobody wanted him on the team to be the starting quarterback at any point. But he's such a good football mind that teams kept signing him. And he was basically just a coach that was getting paid $1 million a year as long as he could still kind of play. And then now finally this year, so like the Bills offered to let him be the coach. And he said, no, I'm going to the Giants. They'll pay me $1 million to be the coach. Right. So this year, finally, nobody would pay him to be the backup quarterback. And now he's a coach for the Denver Broncos. So there's a lot of ways to do it in this league. So Taylor Heineke, even if he doesn't start, I think he made the right call going to this squad. But anyway, let's get into some fantasy. Enough about deep cut backup coaching trajectories.
Robinson here. When he first got drafted and these best ball drafts are going out there, he had like an ADP of 5. And I'm like, geez, everybody is on the Bijan Robinson train. People have sort of stepped back a little bit from that now. He's now going towards the back end of the first round. I've seen him even fall into the early first or second pick of the second round here, which do you still think, given the running backs that are in that grouping, is accurate? I mean, Austin Eckler, Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, all kind of going in that same realm. Does Bijan fit that mold for you when it comes to drafting your lineups?
So the thing is, there's a version of me years ago who would have said, I swear, if I could go back and talk to my own self, I would have said I'm not taking him ahead of Nick Chubb and Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley. But that version of me did that before with Saquon Barkley when he was a rookie, and I was wrong. When conditions are perfect and the talent is amazing and the draft capital is there, you either need to make that pick, make that stab, or you end up missing out. For me personally, I wasn't drafting Bijan at like 3 or 5 in most cases, but I will take him when we get to, outside the top 5 or so guys, which for me is, Eckler, CMC, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and Tyreek Hill. Like I'll consider him over Cooper Kupp, considering the uncertainty with Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, so if you're drafting and it's a board of like Diggs, AJ Brown, that crew, then you're looking at
I'll think about it. Yeah, I will. I'll take him over AJ Brown every time. I'm too scared by by what Vegas is saying about AJ Brown, honestly. Sure. So I will take him there. Yeah, I'm in this time around just because conditions are perfect and he's doing everything right, and they picked him so high. And like I said, the team made such a comfy landing spot for him by bringing everybody in. So I really think that that it's not crazy this time around.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. And the fact that the offense that they want to run on this team, right? Arthur Smith does not hide the fact that he wants to run the football. And we saw him do that and turn Tyler Algier into like 1,000-yard runner and Cordell Patterson into a fantasy relevant running back. And they made it a point to draft their guy in Bijan Robinson here to complement the system that he wants to put in place in Atlanta. So I agree with you. I think the volume should be ridiculous for him. It's just, is this team going to be good enough for him to score? Right?
Yeah, that's it.
If he gets the yards and the catches, like that's all fine, but touchdowns win fantasy. So we need him to get into the end zone, in my opinion, to really pay off where he's going in ADP.
Yep, and that's the real true difference where with a team like this, it's going to boil down to individual effort. And when we get to some of the props, I'll actually talk about that. But let's round out some ADPs.
Yeah, go for it.
We get to the props here. Yeah, so you got Bijan, of course, first round pick. Our ADP 10, RB3. Drake London's the next guy that goes, and he doesn't go till ADP 43 as the wide receiver 22. So we're talking third or fourth round pick. Kyle Pitts, of course, is the tight end 5. You're either in or out on that guy. There's no in between really. There's no just because of Waller and Goddard and Kittle in that range. There's nobody that just really says, all right, fine, I'll take Kyle Pitts. Like you have to actively decide if you want that guy or not, where he goes. Then you got Tyler Algier, RB 47, ADP 145, probably one of the best handcuffs right now, considering we've already seen him do it. Cordell Patterson goes ADP 202, RB 62. Desmond Ridder, QB 30. A lot of uncertainty there, especially in best ball, where if he gets benched for the other quarterback, you're toast. So I think that's the big concern there, is the fact that it's not certain. If they named him the starting quarterback and said that we're riding with this guy, I think we could see that maybe go up a little bit. And then the only other guy that I really ever see go is Matt Collins very late.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't really have a lot of interest in the late picks here, and we'll get into the props here. DraftKings says Drake London 825 yards. Are you taking wide receiver 22 with an 800-yard projection? I'm not really looking to do that.
Rather bet the over.
But Kyle Pitts is at 700.5, but they have the over as the odds favorite at -115. So. That's why I kind of have a little bit more interest in Pitts, because if Pitts now is going to be looking at maybe he's the 800-yard tight end, that's going to pay off the tight end 5.
I think those ADPs they honestly should just need to be straight flipped, because a wide receiver getting 825 is nothing, but the tight end doing it is awesome. I mean, George Kittle is set at 725. Dallas Goedert set at 725. That's where all these guys are really set for pretty much across the board. I mean, even Mark Andrews is only at like a little over 800. So they're saying Kyle Pitts is going to be good. And I think he is a great player. And I think basically you have 2 wide receivers on this team, Pitts and London, but one of them you can start at tight end. So I'm much more likely of these guys, Pitts is the one I'm most likely to draft. And I'm with you, John. Especially in best ball. I'm not drafting Algier, definitely not drafting Cordell Patterson. I have no Matt Collins. So it's basically Bijan, London, Pitts. I don't mind them all, but I'm most likely to draft Pitts out of that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. That's kind of where I'm at. When it comes to this team itself. I don't have the quarterback. I don't have any of the backup running backs here. It's Bijan or Pitts for me, and I kind of find myself moving on.
Yeah, for sure.
Looking at some Vegas totals here, plus 6,000 to win the Super Bowl. Over-unders 8.5 at -120 on the over, plus 100, even money on the under. Division to win, plus 215, like we said. They're second best odds to win the division, but they have the highest win projected total in the division. Go figure that one out. Ridder plus 15,000 to win the MVP. Bijan plus 20,000. I guess if they were to lead the NFC in wins, Bijan would probably be the MVP. But we've talked about this one. Running backs don't win the MVP. They win the Offensive Player Award. So maybe we should see what his odds are to win the Offensive Player of the Year. Coop, let's see what he's got there.
Yeah, pull those puppies up. In the meantime, what I will say is this. So we talked about touchdowns, and we talked about the offense not generating them for him, which we've seen. I mean, the perfect example is obviously New England Patriots. LeGarrette Blount scored 18 touchdowns. Do you think that was because he was a phenomenal runner, or do you think it was circumstance? Like Jamal Williams last year, does he score 17 touchdowns on another team? No, that's part of the case. Yeah. So I will say this: Bijan Robinson, he has the ability and the individual skill set and effort to put together crazy highlight plays and potentially kind of brute force those touchdowns from distance, from 10, 20, 30. So I actually, I like him. He is the favorite for Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think it's like, plus 400 or something like that. But I do like that. And Corey Parsons, shout out from the morning show, actually kind of convinced me that it's interesting to sprinkle a little bit of money on Bijan at plus 20,000, because these are the generational type talents that could potentially break the mold and win that. We have seen running backs in the past have seasons that are so good that they're in the conversation for MVP, and they have one MVP. Adrian Peterson is a MVP of this league. Todd Gurley had a season like that at one point. At plus 20,000, we're talking $100 to win 20,000. Right. I'm not going to throw away $100 on that, but $10 to win $2,000. Right. Yeah, I think I got $10 for that. Right. I think I got $5 to win $1,000. Right. So. Why
not, right?
Yeah, right. Like at that, like just because I like to
They're
go through
wasting
it.
money on less. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I mean, dude, Desmond Ritter's 15,000. I think that's a waste of money, but those odds are better for Ritter to win. I think you're better off. Like, I look through some of the deep odds and I say, is it possible? And I think it's way more possible for Bijan than half these quarterbacks, and all the quarterbacks have better odds. So I don't mind sprinkling that one a little bit. I don't mind betting the over on his yardage, John. I think that's 1,100, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to draft a guy at that level. If he I mean, of course, injuries factored in, but we're expecting if this guy is healthy that he'll have that number. And then after that, John, there's some pretty concerning numbers for some of these other guys, right?
Yeah, well, I
About
mean,
what this
listen,
offense will be.
Yeah, I mean, Bijan's at 1,100 yards on -120 on the under. Ritter 2,600 and a half.
2,600. That's
Yeah.
the lowest, right, of any
Yeah,
QB.
it has to be 2,600 and a half, 120 on the under. Maybe they have it baked in on him not starting all year. Drake London is 825 and a half. Like I said, 825 and a half receiving yards on DraftKings Sportsbook, -120 on the under, and he's going off as wide receiver 22. He's coming off as a wide receiver 2 in fantasy football. Well, expected to get under 825 yards, or even if it's there, like even if he doesn't crush that, what if he gets 850 yards? Like, that's not enough to be a wide receiver 2. And then Kyle Pitts is at 700 and a half yards, -120 in the over. Like I said, I'm more likely to take Pitts at his ADP, thinking I might have a tight end that's going to get me 700 plus receiving yards this year, and that will pay off his ADP than where we have London guy.
Yeah, I think there's a few of those in there. I got the article in the works coming out on that, where you should be betting. Like, you should look around, and if you think either the ADP for a guy is way too high or too low, you should look at what their over under is. And if there's this discrepancy there, then maybe just place those bets there. Me personally, I would rather lose a bet than lose my fantasy team drafting a guy. Like, if they truly think that AJ Brown isn't going to be nearly as good as Diggs and Tyreek Hill and all these other guys, I'd rather not make the bet by drafting AJ Brown. I'd rather make the bet by betting against him or betting on him with Vegas, So that's my philosophy on that. So for a guy like London, I'm more likely to bet the over if I like him than I am to draft him. With a guy like Kyle Pitts, I'll draft him and I'll be happy with 700 and just hope that he has 1,000 yards again, like he just did a year ago,
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Any other thoughts here on this Falcons team?
I actually do like him to bet. So, like, I look at the over/under win total 8.5, whereas the Saints are 7.5. I don't. Rather than bet the Saints to win at +120, I think it's flat enough that I don't mind betting them to win the division at +215. I'm not going to put my life saving on it, but of these teams, that's the one that I feel best about given the odds.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think
if the odds were just even for every team, would you pick the Saints to win the division?
Yes.
Yeah, I
feel like they are. My perception of them is that they're the best team in this division, but Atlanta's definitely right there. I mean,
they're close. Yeah,
they're close for sure. They just have the best quarterback, right? You always just bet on the quarterback, right?
Yeah,
so Derek Carr, in my opinion, is the best quarterback in this division. So you would assume that they would be the best team in this division.
Right. It's just, for me, I look at it and I say, hey, if it was Saints Falcons 1-1, give me the Saints, but Saints Falcons 2-1 is what the odds are. I'll take the 2-1 on the Falcons.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Let's go on over to the Carolina Panthers here. They made the big splash this offseason. They made the trade with Chicago, got the top pick, took Bryce Young with their first pick. They went 7-10 last year. Then they signed Miles Sanders. They obviously traded their top wide receiver and DJ Moore to get that number 1 overall pick. They drafted Jonathan Mingo, brought in some guys like Adam Thielen, DJ Chark to reboost their wide receiver group. Vegas has them at 7.5 wins at -120. Their odds to win I have the West there. Odds to win the South +400, and the Super Bowl odds there +7,000.
Yeah, this team, I mean, this is why I love this division. Is you talk about all the movement, they traded away DJ Moore. They brought in Bryce Young. You draft Jonathan Mingo. The safeties for the Bengals, we had talked about Jesse Bates earlier. The 2 players that played the most snaps for the Bengals defense last year were the 2 safeties, Jesse Bates and Von Bell. Well, the other Jesse Bates went to the Falcons, and Von Bell comes over to the Panthers. So they bring in, and then just think about this offense. It's brand new weapons across the board. DJ Chark, Adam Thielen, Miles Sanders, Hayden Hurst. Beautiful, right? You lose Donta Foreman, but who cares, right? Like, you still got Chuba. Now you have a better player, Miles Sanders. Like, just a great overhaul here for this team. And again, as always, boils down to Bryce Young, right?
Yeah, or it was on a Bryce Young. If that, AAU football player they drafted as a quarterback can, overcome his size differences and become an NFL quarterback. Listen, we've seen guys do it. Drew Brees, not a man of stature, was able to come out and be a Hall of Fame quarterback. So there are plenty of guys that don't fit the prototypical quarterback mold in the NFL that are capable of having some success. But man, those photographers did him no favors with that. Some of those photos they took.
It was like a forced perspective contest all last season, trying to make him look as small as possible, like putting him next to the Leaning Tower of Pisa and make him just look tiny. If they were doing a Leaning Tower of Pisa picture, they wouldn't do the classic one. They'd have him go stand like a million miles behind it, so he just looks like an ant.
Yeah.
But
ADP wise, you and I have been maybe the biggest Miles Sanders truthers for years. While he was a member of the Philadelphia Eagles, guy averages over 5 yards a carry for his career. We were screaming, please just give him the football more. And then he finally did on a year that I was less than in. I was more in on Hurts and Brown. You still had Miles Sanders on your lineups last year, but now he's in a different organization, a different situation. I know you like him still, but what's your expectations for him?
Here's the crazy part is that across the industry, besides Howard Bender, who still argues in favor of standard, but he plays half PPR and full PPR. Across the industry, it's all half PPR and full PPR now. Yet I still see analysts out here making these grand arguments in favor of things that are really only useful in standard, right? Like they're arguing in favor of the RPO and the offensive line and yards per carry, right? Where they look at Miles Sanders and say, oh, well, he's leaving that offensive line and that RPO. His yards per carry are going to come down, to which I say, who cares, right? J.K. Dobbins has like an yards per carry of like 7. But because he doesn't catch passes, because the mobile QB doesn't dump it down, and because he doesn't score touchdowns, because the mobile QB takes all those, then it doesn't help us in fantasy. And Jalen Hurts, second most carries inside the 5-yard line behind only Jamal Williams, and they threw the fewest passes to the running back of any team. And I've said it before, but you look at the numbers, it's not just Jalen Hurts. Nick Sirianni, right? Doug Peterson went out when he was the coach in 2019 through almost 40 screen passes, 39 screen passes just to Miles Sanders and Boston Scott. That was 2019. This past year, Miles Sanders and Boston Scott played more snaps than they did in 2019, and Nick Sirianni only dialed up 6 screens. It's play calling, it's the quarterback, it's everything else. So he goes, and here's the part that we have that's hard to wrap our heads around, is that the offense will probably score less touchdowns and his yards per carry will probably go down. But when his receptions go up and the fact that he actually gets a shot at the goal line, he has a much higher ceiling now. Even if maybe his floor is lower, his ceiling is so much higher now to be the guy. And they've already come out and said, this guy is the guy. There's a video on my timeline of Scott Fitterer saying, remember that time you caught 50 balls? That was awesome. That's why we brought you here. That's what we want to do. So that's it with Miles Sanders. RB20, that's an easy one for me. He was RB15 last year. Now he's got a better upside.
Yeah, one of my more frustrating tweets I sent out last year was a game against Washington where Miles Sanders basically was the man on the drive. He had like a 25-yard run. He had a 15-yard run that got him down inside the 10. And the next 3 plays were all Jalen Hurts rushing, ending with a 1-yard touchdown run. And I was like, what are we doing? Like, Miles Sanders did all the work to get him down inside the red zone, and then when Hurts touchdown.
John, calling it a 1-yard touchdown run is also, that's also kind of egregious because those aren't 1-yard touchdown runs. They're 1-yard like rugby scrums where it's like, you know what I mean? Like that, where people are calling for it to be illegal. And the thing is, if your team has a play that's so effective that the league is calling it illegal and your guy isn't involved in it, I don't want that guy on that team anymore. So that's enough on Miles Sanders. The next game here is pretty obvious. They have 3 wide receivers, technically 4, but 3 that they just brought in this year. They paid up for Thielen and Chark, and they drafted Jonathan Mingo in the 2nd round. These guys are all going outside of pick 140. We're talking 11th round at the earliest. You can draft your entire lineup and then take your pick. So you have Jonathan Mingo right now going at pick 141, wide receiver 63. Right after Thielen, pick 143, wide receiver 64. And then shortly after that, DJ Chark, 158, wide receiver 69. So, John, I mean, like, it's close enough that you can pick your poison. What's your poison?
Yeah, my poison is none of the above.
Come on.
I have zero interest in this team's passing offense. I'm not gonna say I have no exposure. I do have some Mingo, just because again you're doing 50 best ball drafts. He's the one that I've drafted, but it's like 3 shares. There is nothing that I'm looking at when it comes to this team here. I mean, I know you're like a Thielen truther, but DraftKings Sportsbook has him at 550 receiving yards with a -120 on the under.
Pretty bad. What about Chark though? They have Chark at like 700. So that's interesting, is it not? That Vegas is looking at it and they're saying they're saying that we're wrong.
I mean, like where he is going, I guess 700 is fine, but like, does he not just lose out to Mingo here at that point? Like,
here's the crazy part about this offense is that I have been a Thielen truther. I've also been a big DJ Chark fan on paper. And I know, John, we've seen plenty of guys that on paper aren't amazing, but on paper, this guy has, he's, runs like a 6'3" something 40. He's 6'3". Sorry, he runs like a 4.3 40. He's like 6'3" and 200 pounds. And he has a 1,000-yard receiving season on his resume already. So I've liked Chark, and I'm also in on Mingo.
Also now on his 3rd team in 3 years. So it's like,
and they're all cat teams. And he was on a cat team.
On Jonathan Mingo. I don't know. I just feel like that's.
Well, I like Mingo too. People are all off Mingo. Like the cool thing to do on Twitter is to rank the 4 wide receivers that win the first round somewhere as your top 4, and then just skip Mingo and hate on Mingo, and then put Jaden Reed or Rashee Rice next. I don't mind Jonathan Mingo. I think his style of play is very interesting for this league with guys we've seen like Deebo Samuel have crazy seasons because he's very physical and can run the ball at times. He could be the next Laviska Shenault, who is also on that team, but you never know. So I don't know. I kind of like all 3. I like taking stabs on whoever is cheapest. That's kind of my move is I look and see who's grabbing who, and then I take the cheapest guy. So I do have a decent amount of DJ Chark. I also did take
Hayden Hurst in the FSGA best ball draft yesterday. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, like we talk about the rules of the game, right? And how we the first thing you need for a tight end is you need the door to be open somehow, either to be a ambiguity so they could be a top 2 target or somebody to get hurt. There's enough ambiguity there for Hayden Hurst that I don't see why he can't potentially be a favorite of this new quarterback that we've never seen play at this level. So yeah, Hayden Hurst at tight end 25, why not? He falls in the same group of guys like people keep asking me, who's this year's Evan Engram, right? Because last year we were on Engram at tight end 20, he finished tight end 5. And, I don't think there's anybody that falls directly into that, but I look around at guys like Mike Gesicki and Hayden Hurst and maybe Jelani Woods, and I say, why can't they be a top 2 target on their team? A lot of moving parts, new quarterbacks for 2 of those guys. Why not? So at that ADP, it's definitely why not. The guys I'm not drafting I'm not drafting much Chuba. I'm not drafting much Terrace Marshall. And I really don't have a lot of Bryce Young, and I know you probably don't either, right?
No, I haven't. I have not touched any of the rookie quarterbacks outside of Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, there's enough uncertainty at the higher end options, right? The better odds guys. There's more uncertainty there that I don't see a reason to draft Terrace Marshall.
Listen. What's weird is like Terrace Marshall is obviously part of that LSU team that was an absolute monster, right? Like they had so much talent. Right. And Marshall came out, and he's just been in a situation where they haven't used him. He hasn't been able to find himself on the field. You would think maybe with a restart here in this organization that it could be a time for him to get that opportunity. And then they brought in 2 veterans instead to play over him. Now he's not going to play over Chark, but he should have been the Thielen role, or Shenault should have been the Thielen role. Instead, they're like, now we're going to pay old man Thielen to come in and be that guy.
Here's when I'll be interested in Terrace Marshall, both in Dynasty and Redraft. Next year, when Joe Brady, when he's on a new team, when Joe Brady inevitably, that was his coach, his offensive coordinator at LSU, was fired by Matt Rule. Part of the reason they drafted him. Now he's the quarterback's coach over for the Buffalo Bills. When he inevitably gets another shot at offensive coordinator, probably next year, and that whatever team he goes to brings in Terrace Marshall as part of that plan, that's when I'm back on Terrace Marshall.
Right.
So you mark that in your calendars.
Okay.
The moment Joe Brady gets a new job, which next year he will, mark my words, he's going back up to be an offensive coordinator somewhere because people are looking around at Matt Rule firing him and saying maybe Matt Rule should have been fired. So when he gets his shot, that's when Terrace Marshall watch begins again.
Yep, I'm with you there. All right, Vegas totals here. They're plus 7,000 to win the Super Bowl. Not great. Over unders at 7.5. Minus 120 on the over. So that's kind of sneaky because they're plus 400 to win the division. So you look at the divisional win odds, right? And then you look at the team win odds. And if they're minus 120 on the over 7.5, again, the team that has the best odds to win the division in the Saints is minus 120 at 7.5 as well. So they have the same win odds, Vegas win total odds as the Saints, but they're plus 400 to win the division versus Saints plus 120 to win the division. Could be worth of a 4-1 dart throw on the Panthers here.
Absolutely.
Bryce Young's plus 15,000 to win the MVP.
Yeah, so that you know what that does? That just makes it so I just cannot bet the Saints to win the division. Not with those odds and not with what they're telling us with these other lines. Like it's crazy how they're all the same over under for win totals, but the Saints are that heavily favored to win the division. It just makes me not want to place that particular bet. Much more likely to bet on the Falcons or the Panthers to win this division. I'm not going to bet on the Buccaneers to win the division.
I agree with you. Look at the player prop totals here. Bryce Young, 3,400.5 passing yards at minus 115 on the over. So maybe they're in on your wide receivers here. Miles Sanders, 925.5 rushing, minus 105 in the over. I only saw Adam Thielen, but you said you saw Chark at 700. I only saw Thielen at 550. He's minus 120 on the under.
Yeah, I pulled when I was doing my article, I pulled Chark off a different site. So there is a line for him. I think it's on FanDuel, and it is set at 670. It's set at 675.5. Okay. So well ahead of Thielen, which he goes after Thielen. So that's where I stand. That's where I stand on that. I mean, the one that jumps out to me here is the Miles Sanders 925.5. If he's going to get more receiving work as we expect, and they think he's going to be around 1,000-yard rusher, then where he's going at RB20, man. I mean, like this guy with the last time he was with Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson, he had 50 receptions in 1 year, and then the next year he would have been on pace for like 70 targets. The target pace he was on in the year that he got hurt just a couple of years ago, or even the year that before that where he had the 50 receptions, that would have been like top 5 last year. Like Joe Mixon was top 5 with like 7.
They did stop throwing to him though because he had drop problems, right? So like,
is that why though, or is it a change in quarterback?
I thought that there was an issue with him catching the football.
He had some ugly drops. There's no question about that, but in most cases, it's not that drastic of a change. And here's the thing that would have made more sense for me is if Boston Scott or Kenneth Gainwell really took a step forward, and they didn't. Mm-hmm. This team combined. So you combine Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott and Miles Sanders and anybody else you can call a running back dead last in targets. So it's and Kenneth Gainwell was you could say Kenneth Gainwell was a great pass catcher. So why wasn't he being targeted? I think it's systematic. And if you look at Frank Reich with who's calling the plays now, last time he was with the Colts, just like Doug Peterson, the last time Nyheim Hines and Jonathan Taylor were healthy, 40 screens just for the two guys. Sure. So I mean, he's not Nyheim Hines. That's a great pass, like a tremendous pass catcher. But I mean, I could see.
I just wonder because Chuba was the pass catching running back.
Chuba stinks, dude. If Chuba had every opportunity, Chuba has a million opportunities. He's had a million opportunities to be the guy. It's Miles Sanders by a mile.
I will agree. Listen, we're big Miles Sanders guys here. Right. I hope for him to have all the opportunity in the world. Dan Malin ranked the Carolina Panthers offensive line 16th in his offensive line breakdown. Last year, PFF graded them run blocking at 21st, but they dealt with some injuries along their offensive line. So if they can stay healthy, maybe that improves. They had the 11th best pass blocking grade last year, Coop. So good news for Bryce Young here.
They're going to need it.
They continue to pass block well. Let's finish the show up here. We have talked about one team yet. That is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tom Brady no more. Instead, they bring in Baker Mayfield. Quite the drop off here. They could maybe go with Kyle Trask, which people said was the initial plan. They went 8-9 last year. They drafted a defensive tackle there in Kansas to bolster their defense. Vegas, though, only 6.5 wins, with that the over being set at plus 120. So they're thinking bottom of the division here. They have plus 800 on the NFC South odds, Super Bowl odds at plus 8,000 there.
And they mostly just signed with the money they had. They mostly just signed back their own guys, right? Like Jamel Dean and Levante David.
Yeah,
I'm John. I'm sure you looked around for somebody you could put as a best ad over Baker Mayfield, right?
They just, I mean, they didn't really have anybody.
Yeah,
so,
they didn't do much, man. They,
and he's gonna start for them, so like that's probably their best ad, right?
Right. They lost Julio, they lost Sean Murphy Bunting, they lost Tom Brady, obviously, Akeem Hicks, Carl Nassib, dude. So yeah, not that great. And they built the team bridge year style. Elijah Cansey, awesome. Cody Mock, like great story, Cody Mock, and an incredible picture that guy has with missing the teeth and the and the mullet and all that. So Cody Mock's the guy we're rooting for, but those aren't guys that move the needle and make you say this team is going to make something happen, right? So when I go through and I look at this team, I'm not super excited about
I mean, you look at their ADPs, right? It's Rachaad White, it's Chris Godwin, and it's Mike Evans.
Yeah,
those are the only three guys that you're likely looking to draft here. And is this the season that Mike Evans' 1,000-yard run comes to an end? Because if it's Baker or Trask, are they going to be able to support that type of downfield player, right? I know Baker likes to throw downfield, but he's not ever that accurate here. Godwin's going a little bit before him. Maybe that's a little bit better, but again, Baker's not an accurate quarterback, so right. There's some issues there. I do like Rachaad White. I think he's going to get a good amount of work both in the passing game and the running game. And then I want to ask you about Cade Otton and what we're doing at the tight end position, because he's going very late, and he actually had like a sneaky, decent little rookie year.
Yeah, he came out and started as a rookie over guys that have been. I mean, Cameron Brate's a professional football player, right? Like he came out and started and played over him. I do like Cade Otton. So I don't like him as much in best ball because you kind of need an injury. You kind of need one of Godwin or Evans to go down. But I like stashing him in Dynasty, and I love the idea of if Godwin or Evans goes down. Now every year there's a guy where someone gets hurt and that guy gets jumped up. He gets boosted up, right? So he's definitely in that running where he's a kind of a double handcuff to either Godwin or Mike Evans. And with this team and what everyone's saying about it, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Godwin or Evans get traded midseason as well. Because this team's kind of building that way. I do like Rachaad White to potentially, I've been drafting a good amount of Rachaad White because he could be like a James Robinson type guy, or the same reason we like James Conner with the Cardinals, where sometimes teams just say, hey, we got to get through this year. We got a running back, and we're just going to ride him.
There's not really anybody behind him that should be challenging for touches either, right? It's right. He's there. We saw last year he's a very good pass catcher, and he can run the football. So I'm there. Cade Otton would like a word. Yeah.
There you go, George, dude. So now I will say this: it's getting into these props is where it gets interesting, right? Because like you're not gonna bet them to win the Super Bowl plus 8,000. It would need to be plus 8 million. Plus 8,000 is not enough. Over under 6.5. I think that line is because of the weakness of the division. I don't really even like betting the under there, and they make you pay minus 140 for it. But where it gets interesting is when you get into some of these lines, these prop bets, because I actually like the narrative that the common narrative is the easy one to say Baker doesn't push it downfield, so Chris Godwin will be fine. But when you look at the over-unders for these players, Vegas does not think Chris Godwin will be fine, right, John?
No.
You look at it, and Mike Evans is set at 925.5. Now, part of that is public sentiment saying this guy is a lock for 1,000 yards every single season. He's done it 9 years in a row. But Chris Godwin set at 755.5. So they're saying that Mike Evans might be better.
Mike Evans is minus 140 in the under. And DraftKings, sportsbooks don't take, the public narratives into account. They're just, they're analytics here. So
they're setting their line. Yeah.
And I think they're setting their line. And now obviously their idea, they want to middle it. So like 925.5 is sort of where they're looking to make the most money on the middle here, but minus 140 on the under. Godwin is plus 120 on the under, minus 140 on the under for him. Again, I like the Rachaad White thing. It's 650 rushing yards on the over. I would go there. I think you bet the Rachaad White rushing over in this offense here. They'll ride out the run game here.
I mean, but Chris Godwin hasn't. I know he's had better quarterbacks, but Chris Godwin hasn't had under 840 yards since his rookie year. So I mean, what they're doing with these two odds is they're daring you to bet the over on Godwin and daring you to bet the under on Evans, right?
Yeah,
at minus 140. I don't know. I kind of like betting the over on God.
What was the Baker Mayfield year with Landry and Beckham? Did they have a?
Yeah, they were solid, man. Yeah, they both got 140 something targets.
Yeah,
he just peppered those two players, man. He targeted two guys and called it a day, and that might be what the case is here. These lines make me want to not draft Godwin, but bet the over. Over 755, man. I think Baker's.
Yeah. So that the first year they were together, Landry had 1,100 yards. Odell had 1,000 yards. 74 catches for Odell, 83 for Landry, and you mentioned over 130 targets for both. That was Baker's best year yardage wise. Only completed 59% of his passes though, because he's not a good quarterback.
No.
22 touchdowns, 21 interceptions, 3,800 yards passing, but almost all of that went to Landry and Beckham. So that could be this year.
Yep.
Could just be like all of his crappy passes go to Evans and Godwin no matter what, and they just get their volume stats,
So those are DraftKings lines. I pulled up a couple of other ones on Godwin. You can get even money both on FanDuel and Caesars. I don't know if you want to bet the under, you can get 875 at minus 115, and that is not on Caesars. That is Caesars. So Caesars 875 minus
discrepancy.
Yeah, and on FanDuel they have them set at 800, and you can get minus 112 on either side.
Godwin is $7.99 on Prize Picks, just to kind of. So it looks like DraftKings is the lowest.
The low, yeah, they're low, but you have to pay up to bet the over. So yeah, but I think if you're going to bet on it, probably do it on FanDuel, right? Like if it just flat 800, more or less, right? And it's minus 112 on either side. So I think that's probably the fairest line out there. And I'd be willing to bet the over, just given where he's going at ADP and the sentiment around him. So over 800, that's solid. There's not many other bets I want to do. What I'm going to personally do, I'm going to personally just root for Mike Evans to have 1,000 yards because I like Mike Evans. So
you want to keep him getting the yardage.
Yeah, I like that for him. I'm not going to bet on it, but I'm going to root for it, and that's fair. That's my. I can do that as a fan, right?
Yeah, you can certainly do whatever you want, man. You can bet on whoever you want. So that wraps up our quick out fantasy football show here. Coming up next, we have Alarm Fantasy Football. Coop, I think you're on that show too.
I'm going to be on that show. Yeah, I'm talking football
Bender,
all day.
Britt, and Coop will all be on there, so check that out. Stay tuned with us. Remember to get the fantasy football draft guide there. It is free with a subscription. FantasyAlarm.com/all-pro. Promo code NFL50 or Coop will get you 50% off for the first 6 months there as well. Coop and I will be back next Wednesday. We'll talk to you then.